The cold. That's the first thing I remember. It's this deep, seeping cold that has nothing to do with the temperature and everything to do with an ending. It works its way into my bones from the damp ground I'm lying on. The air is thick with the smell of pine needles and rot. My hands are tied behind me, the rope's rough fibers biting into my skin. And I can't scream. It's that dream paralysis, the kind where your throat feels raw from trying, but you can't make a sound. A figure leans over me, their face just a blur of shadows, but their voice, it's a whisper that slices right through the silence, somehow distorted and chillingly familiar all at once. It didn't have to be this way. The voice rasps, and then I see it. The glint of metal, a spade coming down fast. I don't feel it hit, just a sudden awful emptiness as I stare at my own silver locket on my chest, the one my grandmother gave me. Its polished surface reflects the dark trees for the last time. Then, I wake up. My own scream finally tears out, raw and real. I'm a mess of tangled sheets, my heart just hammering against my ribs. My room is soft and gray in the pre-dawn light of a quiet suburban morning. The poster on my wall, my textbooks on the desk, the faint whir of my dad's coffee grinder downstairs. It's all so painfully, beautifully normal. But the feeling from the dream, the cold, the smell of pine, the burn of that locket in my memory, it sticks to me like grave dirt. I tell myself it was just a nightmare. Stress about finals, maybe last night's pizza. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was this was the third time I'd had this exact dream, and each time it felt a little more real. In the light of day, fear always feels a little stupid, doesn't it? I tried to pick the dream apart, to rationalize it into something harmless. I went online, my fingers shaking a little as I typed "dreaming of your own death" into the search bar. The results were weirdly comforting, in a detached, clinical way. They talked about transformation, about the end of one part of your life and the start of another. Death in dreams symbolizes change, one article said, and it sort of made sense. I'm 17. I graduate in a few months. I was about to leave my tiny town of Havenwood Creek, about to shed my whole childhood identity for whatever was next. So maybe my subconscious was just freaking out about it, dressing up my fear of the unknown in the most dramatic costume it could find. I really tried to believe that. I clung to that idea like a life raft. It wasn't a premonition, it was a metaphor, a symbolic death of my old self. It was just textbook psychology, my brain's way of dealing with a huge life change. The tied hands. That meant I felt trapped by my small-town life. The shadowy figure. The faceless future I couldn't control. And the locket. A symbol of my past, my family. Everything I was afraid of losing. It all fit. It was neat and tidy and, most importantly, not real. And for a few days it actually worked. The fear faded to a dull hum. I focused on school, my friends, the comfortable routine of my life. Havenwood Creek is the kind of place where nothing ever really happens. We're a postcard town, tucked in a valley, surrounded by forests, and defined by a stubborn kind of peace. The biggest secret here is who put an inflatable flamingo on the town hall roof last year. Murders don't happen in Havenwood Creek. They definitely don't happen to girls like me. The fragile little piece I'd built for myself shattered about a week later. I was walking home from the library, cutting through Miller's Park. It was one of those perfect spring days, the kind that makes you think everything's going to be okay. And then I saw them. At the base of the old stone fountain, there was this little patch of wildflowers. They were a strange, specific shade of purple, with these delicate, star-shaped petals. I just froze. My breath caught in my throat. They were the exact same flowers I'd seen in my dream, growing right near where my body was supposed to be. It's a coincidence, I told myself, my heart hammering. They're just flowers. But my gut wasn't listening. I started seeing other things. A guy walking his dog in a dark green jacket, the same color I'd glimpsed on the figure in my dream. A car backfiring, a sound that was way too close to the crack of the spade. My rational explanations started feeling pretty flimsy, like a worn-out blanket that wasn't keeping the cold out anymore. The world was suddenly full of echoes from my nightmare, and I felt like I was actually losing my mind. Was I just projecting? Was my freaked-out brain seeing connections that weren't there? Or was reality starting to bend and twist to fit the horrible script from my dream? That's when it hit me. The line between my nightmares and my real life was getting blurry, and I had no idea what side I was on. The dreams started coming almost every night, and they were getting longer, with more details. It felt like I was watching a movie trailer on a loop, but new, terrifying clips were added each time. I could see the place now, not just the woods, but a specific spot. An old, abandoned building with broken windows and a fence with this really distinct rust pattern on the gate. I could hear the gate creak as the figure dragged me through. I could see the moon, and it was full. I started a dream journal, a desperate attempt to keep track of the horror. I'd jolt awake in the middle of the night, grab a pen and just sketch, my hand flying across the page. The rust pattern, the shape of the windows, every chilling word the voice whispered. The locket was always there. The final, silent witness. My friends started to notice I was a wreck. I was jumpy, exhausted, with massive dark circles under my eyes. "Elara, you look like a ghost," my best friend Maya told me, her voice full of concern. I couldn't tell her. "How do you even say?" "I think I'm dreaming about my own murder, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. They'd think I was crazy. My parents wanted me to see a doctor about anxiety. I felt so completely and utterly alone. This wasn't just in my head anymore. It felt like I was being haunted by my own future. The dreams weren't just nightmares now. They were becoming a source of information. And I was the only one who had it. That Saturday, clutching a sketch from my journal, I decided I couldn't just live in fear anymore. I had to know for sure. I typed "abandoned buildings near Havenwood Creek" into my phone. Not much came up, but one result made my blood run cold. The old Blackwood mill right at the edge of town. It was shut down decades ago, surrounded by a chain-link fence, and was a notorious spot for teenagers to sneak into. The picture showed a run-down building that looked terrifyingly familiar, deep in the woods. I had to go. I told my parents I was going for a hike. The walk to that mill was the longest walk of my life. Every rustle of leaves, every snapped twig sent a jolt of panic through me. The forest got thicker and the path grew faint, just like in the dream. And then I saw it. A rusted chain-link fence. A gate hanging off one hinge, with a web-like pattern of rust spreading from the corner. The exact pattern I had sketched in the dark. My breath hitched. This was it. This was the place. I pushed the gate open, and its screech was the exact same sound from my dream. I stepped onto the property. The air was heavy and still, and right there, near the foundation of the crumbling mill, half buried in dirt and leaves, was a piece of coarse, weathered rope, the same kind of thick, scratchy rope that had been tied around my wrists. And that's when I knew. I wasn't going crazy. This wasn't a metaphor for anything. This was a dress rehearsal. I was standing on the stage where my own murder was supposed to happen. My fear changed into something else, something cold and sharp. I wasn't just a victim in a nightmare anymore. I was a detective, and my own life was the case I had to solve. The dreams were my only clues. I started looking at my town differently, not as my idyllic home, but as a crime scene waiting to happen. I started digging through the town archives at the library, scrolling through ancient newspapers on microfiche. Turns out, Havenwood Creek's quiet history had some dark spots. Unsolved disappearances, shady business deals, bitter family feuds that went back generations. The town's peaceful vibe was a carefully constructed lie, hiding layers of secrets. My investigation turned to the people around me. Suddenly, everyone was a potential suspect. There was Mr. Abernathy, the high school janitor who was always just around, watching people a little too long. His brother lost his business to my grandfather years ago in a pretty hostile takeover. Could this be some kind of generational revenge? Then there was the new family down the street, the Hales. They were almost too friendly, but also super private. A quick search showed that Mr. Hale had left his last town after his business partner died under very sudden, suspicious circumstances. And then there was Liam, a guy from my class who'd always had this weird obsession with me, switching between being super flattering and weirdly jealous. His dad owned a construction company, and they had a contract to clear the land around the old Blackwood mill. Any one of them could be the shadow in my dream. The closer I got to the truth, the more it felt like the killer knew. My investigation wasn't a secret for long. One night, a rock crashed through my bedroom window with a note wrapped around it. 2 words in ugly block letters. Stop digging. The next day I found my car tires slashed. I felt constantly watched, like a pair of eyes was on me in the school hallways, in the town square. My safe, perfect town had become a cage, and the bars were closing in. I wasn't just scared of the dream anymore. I was terrified of the waking world. That night, the dream came again, but it was different. It was clearer than it had ever been. The figure leaned down, and for a split second, the shadows on their face moved. I saw a flash of a signet ring on their finger, and the voice, that same awful whisper, said something new. It's a shame. Your mother never should have talked. Then I saw something that made my blood freeze. A page from a calendar blowing in the wind caught on a branch. The date was circled in red, July 28th. That was 3 days away. The dream wasn't just showing me how I would die anymore. It was giving me a deadline. That's when I realized these weren't just nightmares. I was getting messages, spoilers for the final chapter of my life. And the clock was ticking. The signet ring. That had to be the key. It was a really specific design, a snarling wolf's head. I knew I'd seen it before. But where? I spent the next day in a total haze, replaying every conversation, picturing every face. The janitor? No. Liam? No. I scanned old yearbooks, town photos, anything I could get my hands on. Nothing. Totally defeated, I went home, the weight of that deadline pressing down on me. My mom was in the living room, going through old photo albums for some town history project. Need help? I asked, my voice feeling hollow. Oh, look at this one, Alara, she said, her voice full of nostalgia. She handed me a faded picture from the town's Founders' Day picnic, maybe 20 years ago. My parents were there, young and smiling, and standing right next to them, with his arm slung casually over my dad's shoulder, was another man. He was laughing, but his eyes were cold. And on his hand, catching the light, was a signet ring with a snarling wolf's head. It was Mr. Henderson, our neighbor, the kind, gentle man who'd lived next door to us my whole life. the man who brought us cookies at Christmas and always had a cheerful wave for me, and his son, Josh Henderson, my childhood friend, was standing right beside him. The voice from the dream, that distorted, raspy whisper. I played it over in my head, but I stripped away the nightmare filter. It was Josh's voice. All the pieces just crashed together with this brutal, sickening clarity. The Hendersons' business had failed years ago after a deal with my dad went bad. They always pretended it was fine. The note from the dream. Your mother never should have talked. My mom, who loves to gossip, must have told someone about their money problems, and it ruined them. This wasn't some old family feud. This was about a humiliation that had been festering for years, a darkness hiding behind a perfect, neighborly smile. July 28th. Today. I knew I couldn't go to the cops. What was I going to say? My neighbor is going to kill me because I saw it in a dream. They'd have me committed. I was completely on my own. I had to change the ending of this story. I knew the script. I knew the location. I knew the cast. I just had to rewrite the last scene. I sent a text to Josh. Hey, can you help me with something? Meet me at the old mill. It's for a photography project. A few minutes later, he replied, Sure. Be there in 20. I got there first, my heart pounding against my ribs. I propped my phone up on a crumbling wall, hidden from sight, and hit record. I heard his footsteps in the leaves. He walked into the clearing, a friendly smile on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. Hey, Alara, what's this project? He asked, his voice the same easygoing tone I'd known my entire life. I know it's you, Josh, I said. My voice was shaky, but it was clear. His smile faltered. What are you talking about? The dreams, I said, taking a step back. The rope, the locket, this place. I watched his face change, the friendly mask just melting away to reveal the cold, empty person underneath. He let out this short, bitter laugh. You're crazy. Am I? I pushed, my voice getting stronger. It's a shame, I said, twisting the words from my dream. Your father never should have listened to you. I was bluffing, but it landed, his face twisted with rage. He was weak. Your family ruined us. My mother. She died of a broken heart because of what your parents did. And your mother, with her gossiping mouth, she sealed your fate. He took a step toward me, his hands clenching into fists. It didn't have to be this way. It was the line from the dream. But you just had to go digging, didn't you? He lunged, but I was ready. I scrambled back, and from the shadows behind the mill, my dad and Mr. Hale stepped out. I'd called them on my way, telling them just enough that Josh was unstable and had threatened me. Seeing them, Josh just froze, his face a mask of pure hatred and total shock. It was over. The sound of sirens when they finally came didn't feel like a rescue. It felt like a confirmation of the poison that had been living right under the surface of my perfect little town all along. Josh confessed to everything. The stalking, the threats, the detailed plan to kill me and make it look like a random tragedy. He admitted he'd been tormenting me, enjoying my fear, wanting me to know what was coming. The dream, the premonition. Maybe it was some kind of gift. Or maybe my own mind in its terror had just been paying closer attention than I ever did, piecing together all the little clues of Josh's growing darkness that I had missed. I survived. I solved my own murder before it happened. But Havenwood Creek will never feel like home again. I've seen the darkness behind the friendly smiles and the perfect lawns. I was transformed. Not by some vague psychological journey, but by a brutal collision with reality. The death I dreamed of wasn't just a symbol, it was a future I barely escaped. And in a way, the naive girl I used to be really did die in that forest after all. The nightmares we have, the stories our minds tell us when we're asleep, we usually just dismiss them as fear or fantasy. But what if sometimes they're trying to tell us something? What if they're a warning we need to listen to? If you want to explore more stories that live in that unsettling space between what's real and what's not, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. Now I have to ask you, leave a comment below and tell me, what would you do if you dreamed your own death? I'm packing my bags. Not just for college, but to get out of this place for good. My mom was helping me sort through some old boxes from the attic when we found it. A small, leather-bound journal. It was my grandmother's. As I flipped through the fragile pages, I found an entry from 50 years ago. She wrote about these terrifyingly vivid dreams she was having. Dreams about an accident that hadn't happened yet. A dream that showed her exactly how to save my grandfather from a collapsing bridge on the Old Town Road. At the bottom of her last entry, she'd written one single, chilling sentence. The nightmares didn't stop with him. I fear this is a gift or a curse that runs in our blood. And last night, for the first time since that day at the mill, I dreamed again. But it wasn't my death I saw this time. It was a stranger's, by the fountain in the center of town, under a sky that I know I'm going to see again very, very soon.